you cannot be a messenger unless you're already a prophet, right? So every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet gets the rank of being a messenger. Now, how is he related to Ibrahim alayhi salam? Lut alayhi salam was actually the nephew of Ibrahim, right? The direct nephew of Ibrahim. So Ibrahim, he had a brother named Haran, and Haran's brother, Haran was the father of Lut alayhi salam, right? So Ibrahim was his paternal uncle. Now, as we've covered before, Lut alayhi salam, when they wanted to kill Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he made hijrah and he went away from his people. All right, he made hijrah to Asham. And when he went there, Lut alayhi salam also went with him as well. Now, when he settled there in Palestine, Ibrahim alayhi salam commanded Lut to go towards a place called Sadum. Now, Sadum, is this place where, we're going to talk about Allah Azza wa Jalla destroys the people of Sadum, and they're the people of Lut. They are Qawm Lut. So, what do we know exactly? Like, what do we know about? What do we know about Sadum? All right, where exactly is this place? Now, there's many scholars who hint to the fact that this place is near the location today that we know of as the Dead Sea. So the Dead Sea in that area, around that area, we don't know exactly where. And Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, he hints to the fact that Qawm Lut, the people of Lut, that they are around that area. Do we know exactly where they were? No, right? We don't have the information as to where exactly they were. All right, and this is the view of many historians, and of course the people of the book as well, right? They believe the same thing, that it's around that general area of the Dead Sea. And Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions in the Quran, وَإِنَّكُمْ لَا تَمُرُّونَ عَلَيْهِمْ مُصْبِحِينَ. Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions that how Allah Azza wa Jalla addressed the Arabs that you would pass by them in the morning. وَبِاللَّيْلِ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. And you would pass by them at night. Do you not think and ponder and use reason? So Allah Azza wa Jal, He tells the people of Mecca, the Quraysh, that they pass by. And the thing is, when they would go on their trade routes, they would pass by this place, the Dead Sea, right? And it was a place that was well known to them. And when Allah Azza wa Jal talks about, the remnants of the people of Lut, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that you pass by them. So perhaps this is hinting at the fact that this was something known, and it wasn't a mystery as to where the people of Lut, the remnants were. All right, but Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. And as I said, we don't know exactly where. So we can say, generally speaking, it's around that area, but we have no idea where exactly to pinpoint their exact location. And Allah knows best. So in terms of Lut alayhi salam, Lut, he moves to the people of Sadum. And of course, Lut is a prophet. He's a righteous person. Allah Azza wa Jalla has chosen him, and he's a messenger. And we've mentioned that the difference between a messenger and a prophet is that a messenger comes to disbelieving people, and that's what Lut alayhi salam did. Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions وَلُوطًا إِذْ قَالَ لِقَوْمِهِ أَتَأْتُونَ الْفَاحِشَةَ مَا سَبَقَكُم بِهَا مِنْ أَحَدٍ مِنَ الْعَالَمِينَ. Lut alayhi salam, he said to his people that do you do a fahisha, do you do a lewd act, right? Are you going to commit a sin that no one before you has ever committed? Now, fahisha is used for something that is generally of a disgusting sexual act, something that's lewd, something that's very inappropriate. So Lut alayhi salam, he's telling his people that you're committing a sin, you're doing a fahisha that no one before you has ever done. Now, what exactly is this sin? Before we get to that, we have to understand that this sin that they were committing was never done by anybody of the human beings before this point. Right? No one ever committed this type of a sexual act before the people of Lut. So we have to understand that this obviously affects our discussion when we talk about that particular sin today. All right, because then there's this whole, and of course the sin that they were committing was that men would basically be intimate with men. All right, homosexuality. All right, now the homosexual act. All right. So this obviously is going to affect our discussion of how we view homosexuality. Do we look at it as something that is natural, that someone is born with, or do we look at it as something that people kind of choose to do, or that there's some choice involved? All right, like, is it nature or is it nurture? Right, that's a very important discussion that people are having. So obviously, looking at the fact that Lut alayhi salam, his people were the first people that ever did this act. Could it be something that was just natural in their time? Could they have just developed some gene or something? Perhaps that's not likely, right? Because how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how could Lut alayhi salam expect them to disobey their desires if it's something that's innate within them that Allah Azza wa Jalla has created within. This is a long discussion, but that's just something for you to think about, because it does, what we're learning from the Quran will definitely impact the discourse. Now, what exactly was that fahisha? In Surah Al-Shu'ara, Lut alayhi salam, he tells his people directly what that fahisha is, and he tells them that they should not do it. So in Surah Al-Shu'ara, Lut alayhi salam, he says, "Atatuna dhukrana min al-alamin." He says to his people that, do you go to men out of everyone? Right, out of everything that Allah Azza wa Jalla has created for you, do you go towards men? In other words, do you men, he's talking to the men of his people, that do you fulfill your sexual desires with the same gender, right, out of everyone, min al-alamin? And then he says, وَتَذَرُونَ مَا خَلَقَ لَكُمْ رَبُّكُم مِّنْ أَزْوَاجِكُم, and you leave what Allah has created you from your spouses. بَلْ أَنْتُمْ قَوْمٌ عَادُونَ, rather you are a transgressing people. Lut alayhi salam, his people, they committed a lot of acts, but in this set of verses, he's specifically referring to that act, to that fahisha, right? And he's not necessarily directly addressing other acts, right? He clearly says that, do you leave your wives that Allah has created for you? Rather, you are a transgressing people. So in that same context of talking about this fahisha, he tells them that they are transgressing. So this is not my statement or any random person's statement. This is Lut alayhi salam is telling his people that you're transgressing, right? You're transgressing. Obviously, he's saying this only because he's Allah's messenger and he's conveying the message of Allah. And then he also says, قَالَ إِنِّي لِيَعْمَلِكُم مِّنَ الْقَالِينَ. He says that I detest this action that you're doing. Right? It's something that I hate. I find it disgusting. And then he says, رَبِّ نَجِّنِي وَأَهْلِي مِمَّا يَعْمَلُونَ. He says, oh my Lord, save me and save my family from what they're doing. So he sought Allah Azza wa Jalla's refuge from these people and from what they were doing. So it wasn't just the act, but he sought refuge from the people as well, because they were the ones that were perpetrating the act and promoting it and pushing it. All right. So now we have to understand, it wasn't just the homosexual acts that these people were doing. And of course, in Islam, that's something that is sinful. And we're going to talk about how to deal with this community of people and some of the misconceptions that people have in terms of dealing with them. And that's very important that we address. We have to understand that it wasn't just the homosexual acts that they were doing, it was other things as well. Allah mentions, كَذَّبَتْ قَوْمُ لُوطٍ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Allah mentions that the people of Lut denied the messengers. So not only was it just that they were doing this act, but it was kufr as well. It was disbelief. They rejected him as a messenger. All right, so they rejected him as a messenger. They denied him, as Allah mentions. And then Allah mentions, some other deeds that they have done that we're going to get to, inshallah. Now, in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us a very detailed story as to what happens until it comes to the point where they are destroyed. So these people, Allah makes it very clear that they would commit this act, and they would come to each other and they would do it openly, and they wouldn't care about this act, along with their kufr, along with the other crimes that they would do. All right. Now Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions that how He sent down some angels, a group of angels, right? At least 3 angels, as some of the scholars have mentioned. And these angels, they came to Ibrahim. We have to understand that Ibrahim was a contemporary of Lut alayhi salam. He was his uncle and he was alive during the same time. So the angels, they came to Ibrahim and they were giving Ibrahim the news of a son. Now at this point, Ibrahim has already had a son, and that son is Ismail. And at this point, he had sent Hajar and Ismail. Hajar is his other wife, the mother of Ismail. He had sent them all the way to Mecca. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, being in Sham, being in Palestine with his wife Sarah, these angels came to him and told him that you're going to have a son, and that son is Ishaq. Right? And Allah mentions وَمِن وَرَاءِ إِسْحَاقَ يَعْقُوبَ, and the angels also gave them the news that after Ishaq, Yaqub will come as well. So Allah mentions that the wife of Ibrahim, Sarah, she was surprised by this news. She said, قالت يا ويلتا أألد وأنا عجوز وهذا بعلي شيخا. She said that woe to me, am I going to give birth? And I'm such an old woman. This is in Surah Hud, right? That she's so surprised that she's going to have a child, and she says that woe to me, right? Like out of exclamation, right? Out of being surprised. She said, woe to me, am I going to give birth? And and I'm an old woman, while I'm an old woman, and this is my husband and he's an old sheikh, right? وَهَذَا بَعْلِي شَيْخًا, and this is my husband and he's reached an elderly age. إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ عَجِيبٌ. So then she says that how this is something that's amazing. And then the angels, they respond with other things. And of course, we're not going to mention every single verse about this story, but we're just going to give a summary, inshallah. But the angels basically in Surah Hud, you could read the following verses in this section. This is towards the middle, towards the end. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that how the angels, they also, not only were they coming to Ibrahim to give him the news of a child, but they were also telling Ibrahim that they will destroy the people of Lut. So these angels, they came to Ibrahim alayhi salam and they said that we will destroy these people, right? They said, "Inna muhliku ahli hadhihi al-qaryah," that we are going to destroy the people of this town. Now, when Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he heard that, he said, "Qala inna fiha Luta." He said that Lut is in this place. How could you destroy that place when Lut alayhi salam is there? My nephew, obviously he cares about his family. And he knows that Lut alayhi salam is a righteous man. He's a prophet. He's a messenger. So he says to the angels that how can you destroy this place when Lut alayhi salam is present therein? And then they respond, they said, قَالُوا نَحْنُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنْ فِيهَا. They said that we know more than you. We are the ones who know the most about who are in that place. Allah has sent us to destroy that place, and we know who are dwelling in that area. لَنُنَجِّيَنَّهُ وَأَهْلَهُ إِلَّا امْرَأَتَهُ كَانَتْ مِنَ الْغَابِرِينَ. They said that we will save him and save his family, along with those who believed, except his wife. Right? She will be from those who are going to be left behind. Right? She's going to be from those who will be destroyed. So very clearly, the angels tell Ibrahim that don't worry, Lut alayhi salam will be saved. However, his wife, right? His wife, she's not going to be saved, and she was a disbeliever. And we're going to talk a little bit about his wife as well. Now, Lut alayhi salam, when these angels, Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions that these angels, they left Ibrahim alayhi salam, and Ibrahim alayhi salam, he tried to offer them some food, and they refused to eat. Right? He cooked some lamb and he presented to them, and then they refused to eat. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, at the very beginning, when they first came, he was a bit puzzled, and then they gave him the news of a child, and then they basically made it clear that they were angels. But Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was very surprised. And the thing is, many scholars use this as evidence to show that the angels don't eat food. Right? That the angels do not eat food, that they do not eat and they do not drink. Wallahu a'lam. And of course, they're a different creation, but they came in the form of human beings, right? That's why Ibrahim did not recognize them right away. So they left Ibrahim alayhi salam, and then they made their way off to Lut alayhi salam and the people of Lut. Now Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that Ibn Kathir rahmahullah, he mentions that how these angels were Jibril, Mikael, and Israfil, these three angels. So when these angels came, Ibn Kathir rahmahullah, and this is something that many of the early scholars of tafsir from the Salaf, this is something that they have mentioned, that they have mentioned that these three angels, they were in the form of handsome human beings, right? Handsome men, really good looking guys. And when they came to the people of Lut, when they came to Sadum, there's a river that was there. And when they came to this river, they passed by the daughter of Lut alayhi salam, right? The daughter of Lut. And then they asked her that, do you have a house? Do you have a family? And then she basically told them that, yeah, my house is over here. And she invited them over. And when they came over, remember, they were very good looking guys. And in that society, that's something very dangerous, to have good looks and then you're a traveler. The people of Lut, they would have taken advantage of these men. And that's exactly what they're going to try to do. So they came to Lut alayhi salam, they came to his house. Allah mentions that وَلَمَّا أَنْ جَاءَتْ رُسُلُنَا لُوطًا سِيءَ بِهِمْ وَضَاقَ بِهِمْ ذَرْعًا. Allah mentions that when the guests, when these angels, when they came to Lut alayhi salam, he felt uneasy, he felt bad, right? He felt worried for them, right? He felt distressed for their well-being. Why? Because they're really good-looking guys, and he doesn't really know exactly who they are, but they're his guests, and he wants to entertain his guests. And then he says, وَقَالُوا لَا تَخَفْ وَلَا تَحْزَنْ. But they reassured him that they were angels, right? That they were angels, but not right away. Lut alayhi salam, as Ibrahim, they did not know that these were angels right away. They just thought that these were very good-looking guys and that they are just travelers. All right, but they were both, Lut alayhi salam, he was concerned for them. He didn't want anything bad to happen to them. So there's many narrations, like some of the scholars mentioned that how Lut alayhi salam, he basically told these men that he tried to allude to them that please leave this place in a polite way. He didn't tell them like get out in a mean way. No, he tried to allude to them that listen, this is a place that you guys should not come around. It's very dangerous. But they didn't listen because their job was to give him a message and to save him. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows that that, I mean, they're angels. What are these people gonna do, right? The angels would definitely weren't gonna get harmed by the people of Lut. So when they came, Lut alayhi salam, he basically brought these men into his house. Now that was a problem. Um, his people came in Surah Hud. Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions is that the people of Lut, they came. وَجَاءَهُ قَوْمُهُ يُهْرَعُونَ إِلَيْهِ, and his people, they came running when they heard about new people coming into town. Good looking guys. They ran. They rushed to go see who these guys were. And they came to him running. وَمِن قَبْلُ كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ السَّيِّئَاتِ, and before this, they were doing a lot of bad deeds. Whether these deeds were their homosexual acts or their killing or whatever the case is, they were doing سيئات, their sins, right? قال يا قوم هؤلاء بناتي هن أطهر لكم. Lut alayhi salam said to his people when they came rushing towards him, and the scholars like Ibn Kathir, they've mentioned that how Lut alayhi salam, he locked his door. He locked his door because they were trying to basically break in. So he had to lock his door. They were about to break in the door. Lut alayhi salam, he basically said to his people, he said, قال يا قوم هؤلاء بناتي هن أطهر لكم. He said, oh my people, these are my daughters. They are more pure for you. They are more pure for you. So does this mean that Lut alayhi salam, this mob that was basically coming to his house, was he basically offering his daughters to these sick men, right? That were basically trying to get to these angels in the form of men, right? Was he offering his daughters to these sick people? And if you look at the Jewish and Christian sources, you're going to find that they say just that these were the daughters of Lut alayhi salam, and he was basically offering them to these men to basically take advantage of. Like, leave these angels, but don't touch them, but you can have my daughters. Now, if you look at what the scholars of tafsir say, for example, Ibn Jarir al-Tabari in his tafsir, he mentions the aqwal of the some of the Sahaba, and he mentions from the Salaf, from the Tabi'een as well. And what you find is that the early Muslims, the early scholars like Mujahid, Qatada, Sa'id ibn Jubair, and others, they've all mentioned that Lut alayhi salam, when he said that these are my daughters, he does not mean his actual daughters. He had daughters, but he didn't mean these daughters of his. What he meant was the women of his people, right? I believe it's either Mujahid or Qatada or both of them. They've mentioned that a prophet to his people is like a father. That's why Allah mentions in Surah Al-Ahzab on the first page, Allah mentions that وَأَزْوَاجُهُ أُمَّهَاتُهُم, that the wives of the Prophet ﷺ are their mothers, the mothers of the believers. So that makes the Prophet ﷺ like a father to the believers. So many of the early Muslims, they said that how Lut alayhi salam, he doesn't mean his actual daughters, right? His blood related daughters. He means that the daughters of his people, of his qawm, of his nation. So when he says that, oh my people, these are my daughters, in other words, all of the women, you have all of these women in your society, hunna atharu lakum, they are more pure for you. Right? So that's what he means. And then he says, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُخْزُونِي فِي ضَيْفِي. He says that have the taqwa of Allah, have the fear of Allah, and do not humiliate me. Right? Do not humiliate me among my guests. And then he says, أَلَيْسَ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلٌ رَشِيدٌ. He says that how is there not anyone of sense among you? Right? Anyone of guidance among you? Is there not a guided person among you? And then they said something that's a bit disturbing. They said, قالوا لقد علمت ما لنا في بناتك من حق وإنك لا تعلم ما نريد. They said that, Lut, you certainly know what we want, right? They said that how, Lut, you know that we have nothing to do with your daughters, and you know exactly what we want, right? And then so Lut alayhi salam, he was very disturbed by what they were saying, and they were basically not going to listen. And Allah Azza wa Jal mentions, وَجَاءَ أَهْلُ الْمَدِينَةِ يَسْتَبْشِرُونَ. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that how his people came to him rejoicing. They were happy and they were excited because he wanted to see these men. And then Lut alayhi salam, he responds to them, and then he says, قَالَ إِنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ ضَيْفِي فَلَا تَفْضَحُونَ. He said that these are my guests, so do not humiliate me. And then he says, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُخْزُونَ. Fear Allah Azza wa Jal and do not humiliate me. And then he says, don't embarrass me, don't disgrace me. And then they said, قالوا أولم ننهك عن العالمين. They said that did we not forbid you from entertaining guests? So Lut alayhi salam, his people, they forbade him from entertaining any sort of guests. So this is one of the reasons why they wanted to break down his house, and they basically wanted to open the door on him. Now, so they tried to seduce his guests. Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions in another place, وَلَقَدْ رَاوَدُوهُ عَنْ ضَيْفِهِ فَطَمَسْنَا أَعْيُنَهُمْ فَذُوقُوا عَذَابِي وَنُذُرِ. In Surah Al-Qamar, Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions that how they tried to seduce, tried to seduce his guests. They tried to seduce his guests. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that how then taste my torment and my warnings. So the angels at this point, they're inside of Lut alayhi salam, inside of his house. Okay. So the angels at this point, they said, قالوا يا لوط إن رسل ربك لن يصلوا إليك. The angels, they said that, O Lut, we are messengers from your Lord, and they will not reach you. Right? They will not reach you. فأسر بأهلك بقطع من الليل ولا يلتفت منكم أحد إلا امرأتك. They said that take your people and leave in the night, and do not let anyone from among you turn back. Right? Don't let anyone from among you look back, except for your wife. إنه مصيبها ما أصابهم, that whatever will happen to them will happen to her as well. Right? Whatever punishment will come to them, will come to her as well. إن موعدهم الصبح, that their time of punishment is in the morning. أليس الصبح بقريب, isn't the morning close? So Lut alayhi salam, he gets his people, and then they leave in the night. Right, that same exact night, he gets all of his family members, and the scholars of tafsir, they have some different opinions. And Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, he mentions this, that did Lut alayhi salam, did his wife, did she leave with the household? Did she leave with the household and leave with them, or did she stay back with the people? The scholars of tafsir, they have different opinions about this. So some scholars, they've mentioned that how his wife stayed back at the house and she didn't leave in the night. And other scholars mentioned that how his wife, she did leave with the people, right? She did leave with the people, and but when she left with them and she was on the way in the night, when the punishment came down on those people, she turned back, and she looked back and she turned back, and then the punishment afflicted her as well. All right, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us how they were destroyed. Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions, فَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا, when our command came, جَعَلْنَا عَالِيَهَا سَافِلَهَا, we basically turned them over. And the scholars of tafsir like Mujahid and Qatada, they've mentioned that how Jibreel alayhi salam basically took his wing, and he basically flipped them over. He basically lifted this entire town of people, and he basically lifted them up to the sky, and then he basically turned them over, and then they fell. And then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَأَمْطَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ مَطَرًا وَأَمْطَرْنَا عَلَيْهَا حِجَارَةً مِّن سِجِّيلٍ مَنْضُودٍ. Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions that how we rained over them rocks, stones, right, that were hot and were basically baked clay, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rained over them these stones, and they just fell on them, in layers, right? So it wasn't just one, one, I guess, shower of stones. It was stone after stone that was, basically falling on these people. Now, Lut alayhi salam, his wife, Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in the Quran about the wife of Lut and the wife of Nuh alayhi salam, alayhim salam. And Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that how these women, the wives of Lut and Nuh alayhim salam, فَخَانَتَاهُمَا فَلَمْ يُغْنِيَا عَنْهُمَا مِنَ اللَّهِ شَيْئًا وَقِيلَ دَخُلُوا النَّارَ مَعَ الدَّاخِلِينَ. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in Surah Al-Tahrim that these two women, that they betrayed their husbands. Now, what does it mean that they betrayed their husbands? Normally, when that type of speech is used, when someone says that, oh, this person betrayed her spouse, or he betrayed, his spouse, normally that means that perhaps they cheated on their spouse. But that's not what is meant here. In fact, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said that ma baghat imra'atu nabiyyin qat. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said that no prophet's wife has ever committed adultery. Right, and that is just to protect the honor of those prophets. Allah Azza wa Jalla never decreed that this would happen. Now the question is, why did Allah Azza wa Jalla, why did He punish them so severely? Why did He punish these people so severely? And we have to realize that there's many reasons for that. Number one, Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions that they would do something called qat'u sabil. Allah mentions وَتَقَطَّعُونَ السَّبِيلَ, that Lut alayhi salam said to his people that you would basically cut off the path. What that means is that anybody who was passing by, they would basically they would basically rob them, right, and steal from them. We've already covered their homosexual acts that they would do. And Allah mentions وَتَأْتُونَ فِي نَادِيكُمُ الْمُنْكَرَ, and they would do evil in their gatherings. And some of the scholars of tafsir, they mention that this refers to them actually committing sexual acts in the open, and nobody would stop those deeds. And they would do all sorts of evil things in the open, and nobody would stop those things. And then they also asked for punishment as well. Right? They said to Lut alayhi salam, they said, قَالُوا ائْتِنَا بِعَذَابِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ. They said that bring the punishment of Allah if you're truthful. Right? Bring the punishment of Allah Azza wa Jal if you're truthful. So for all of these reasons, they asked for Allah's punishment. So because of them asking for that punishment, it wasn't as if Allah Azza wa Jal sent down that punishment. And also, this was the greatest crime, and that was their kufr, their disbelief. Right? Their disbelief. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that how they were mujrimeen as well. They were criminals. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions that إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَوْمَ سَوْءٍ فَاسِقِينَ, that they were evil people and they were rebellious. They were rebellious, evil people. Now, one thing I want to highlight is that we briefly spoke about Lut alayhi salam, his daughters, and how the angels, they basically came by, and it was his daughters who basically brought the angels to him, right, to his house. Now, if you look at what the people of the book, what they say about Lut alayhi salam and his family, you find that in some of the Jewish and Christian sources, there's a lot of strange things that they say about Lut alayhi salam. So, for example, if you read Genesis 19, verses 30 to 38, right? This is in the Bible. It mentions how the two daughters of Lut alayhi salam, how they got him drunk and they committed zina with him. And there's even some of the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, they say that how Lut alayhi salam, he secretly coveted his daughters, he desired them, and they basically got him drunk, and one after another, they, for a period of 2 nights, they basically got pregnant from their own father. And Lut alayhi salam, he was into that, right? Incest. If you think about how strange that is, and I'm not making this up. You guys can read this, and it's very strange. And as Muslims, we have to understand that maybe they're mentioning this about Lut alayhi salam, but we reject this as Muslims, right? Lut alayhi salam is a great prophet of Allah Azza wa Jal. He's from the Mursaleen, and the prophets in Islam, compared to a lot of other religions, we have a lot of respect for these prophets, and they don't commit sins like other people. Of course, they may make mistakes or commit minor sins, but they don't commit these fawahish and incestual acts that people say that they did, right? So we free Lut alayhi salam, his name, from this act. Now, something that we're going through right now, we're going through this virus right now. We're going through this difficulty right now. And there's a hadith that comes to mind. That's a hadith in the Sunan of Ibn Majah. The Prophet ﷺ, he says that لم تظهر الفاحشة في قوم قط حتى يعلنوا بها إلا فشا فيهم الطاعون والأوجاع التي لم تكن مضت في أسلافهم الذين مضوا. The Prophet ﷺ, he tells us that anytime fahisha is spread among a community, anytime fahisha is spread among a people, immoral sexual acts are done openly, right? And حتى يعلنوا بها, until it's done openly and it's broadcasted. The Prophet, he tells us that anytime this happens, فَشَا فِيهِمُ الطَّاعُونَ, right? Plagues will start to appear among them. وَالْأَوْجَاعِ, and diseases and things that cause a lot of pain and discomfort, like diseases. التي لم تكن مضت في أسلافهم الذين مضوا. And these diseases and these plagues, they will be of the kind that was never known among people before them, right? These are going to be like new diseases, new epidemics that that were never known by people before, right? That these things never came about before. So if you think about this, is there a lot of fahisha that are spread around our place that we're living in, the world, in fact the world at large? I think that anyone who's looking, at news, or you're watching movies or cartoons or whatever the case is, you could definitely see that there's a lot of fawahish that's being spread around, right? A lot of nakedness, a lot of sexuality. Sex is something that sells now, right? Just look at social media, or just look at YouTube or these platforms. Anytime someone wants to get a lot of views, they put something of a sexual nature on there. And this is not just something that is in one locality or one country. This is something that's spread all around the world, right? So just think about that we're living in a time of hypersexuality where it's something that people think it's like, it's like doing anything. It's like drinking water or whatever the case is, and they do it in the open, right? So perhaps that's a reason, perhaps, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best of what's happening right now. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to protect us. Now, another issue that I want to address is when it comes to the Dead Sea. We've said that around this area of the Dead Sea, that is where the people of Lut were. That is where the people of Lut alayhi salam, that's where they were. Now the question is, would it be permissible for us to use Dead Sea products, like for example the salts from that area, or let's say for example the minerals or whatever is found in that area? Would it be permissible for us to use those things? In our discussion about the people of Thamud, we've mentioned that Allah Azza wa Jal, that place that He has destroyed the people of Thamud in Madain Salih, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba, when he passed by that place, he didn't allow them to use the water from that place. So can we say that the Dead Sea is, that is going to take the same ruling? The scholars have different opinions. Some scholars say that it would take the same ruling because it's a place that Allah Azza wa Jalla has destroyed people in. But there's other scholars who say that there's nothing wrong with using these products that are made from the Dead Sea, and there's nothing wrong with visiting the Dead Sea. There's nothing wrong with swimming in the water or using it for wudu. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Why? Because there's no text that tells us that the people, that this place, the Dead Sea, that it will take the same ruling as the people of of Thamud. Okay, and there's many reasons for this. Number one is that we don't know the exact location. And the first reason why we can say that the Dead Sea takes the same ruling is because we don't know the exact location of the people of Lut alayhi salam, where they were destroyed. We don't know exactly where it was, and that would affect obviously the ruling. Another point is that we don't know of any specific hadith forbidding this. The third point is that we don't know of any of the Sahaba that they have ever forbidden anyone from making wudu at the Dead Sea or using anything from the Dead Sea, right? And also the fourth point is that this is a huge area. It's a gigantic area. So to be able to pinpoint where exactly the people of Salih were is, even if we had a general idea, it'll be very difficult. And the truth is we don't know exactly, precisely where they were. Now, one thing that I also want to address is, how should we look at acts like acts of homosexuality? How should we view those acts? One thing we have to understand is that to do the act, let's talk about how sinful this act is, or when it can be sinful and when it's not. When do you commit a sin by having, these actions done, or when is it not sinful? So, let's start from the examples of where it's sinful. The first, I guess, level we can say is where it's going to be sinful, where someone does the act. Of course, inside of Allah Azza wa Jal, and this is not any difference of opinion in our tradition, but by ijma' of Muslim scholars, it's something sinful, right, to do. Just like drinking alcohol is something sinful, it's sold in stores. We're not going to go fight people because they're selling alcohol. No, right? It's something sinful, right? Religiously, it's something sinful, even though it's something that's widespread socially. So the first point we have to understand is that if someone does it, then that action would be sinful, right? It's something sinful, that they will be transgressing against Allah Azza wa Jal, and their akhirah by doing this deed. So that's clear when the action is actually done. The second level, let's say someone doesn't do it, but they plan on doing it. They have plans tonight to do it, or they have plans next week to do it. In that case, the person will get the sin of the intention as well as the action, even though they didn't do the action. But because they planned on doing the action, they will get the sin of the action as well. And the proof for this is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He tells us that when two Muslims meet each other to fight each other, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the one who is doing the killing and the one who is dead, both of them are in the fire. And when the Sahaba asked him about the one who was killed, he said that they said that how could the one who was killed, how can he be in the fire? And the Prophet ﷺ said that he was planning to kill his brother. So murder in Islam, even though you don't commit murder, if you plan on doing it, even though you don't get to do it, but due to circumstances, you're not able to do it, you're still going to get the sin of the action. So that's the second level. If you plan on committing this act, you'll get the sin of doing the act, even though you don't even do it. The third level is when you have an intention, but you don't have any plan. You have an intention in your heart, you want to do, you have a desire to do it, you have a liking to do it, but you don't have any plan to actually do it. If you could find a way right now, you wouldn't know what it is to do this sin. And these, of course, these levels apply to any sin. But I want to make a point here that we have to understand that not every type of homosexual feeling is always sinful. So the third level is when someone has an intention to do this act, and they don't have any plan. In this case, they only get the sin of the bad intention. All right, and the fourth level is when it's just a thought or an uncontrollable desire, and in this case, a person is not held accountable for what they can control. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not hold a soul accountable for more than what it can bear. All right, and this is just like, for example, Ramadan. When Ramadan is around the corner, does it mean that when you pass by the kitchen while you're fasting, you have a desire to eat? Does it mean you're sinful just for that desire? No. If you have an intention to eat, you get the sin for the intention. If you have a plan to eat, you actually detailed it out in your mind, you get the sin of the intention as well as the action. And if you eat, then it's even worse, right? So think about that. That will hopefully help us conceptualize these issues, especially that of homosexual acts. Now, we have to understand that a lot of our youth, a lot of people in our communities, that they're facing this. And instead of ridiculing them and shaming them, we should try to help them out. Try to help them out, explain things to them instead of pushing them away. We have to understand some people are facing these thoughts and desires, and they're not controlling it, right? Like, what I mean by that is that they don't have the ability to actually control it. So so these people, because of their uncontrollable thoughts, perhaps they're not being held accountable for that, right? They won't be held accountable for something that they can't control, and some of them are battling this, right? Some of them are battling this. So and they're trying to fight this as much as possible, right? So we should try to help these people. Another point is that though we disagree with this action and that we say that it's an immoral action and that it's sinful, that does not justify in any way for us to go out and to physically stop them from doing this in this land that we're living right now. And we will say that this is something that's wrong, right? Anytime we hear of any violence against this community, the LGBTQ P community, this community, anytime we hear about any violence, we have to condemn it because we don't condone that. We disagree with the act. But just like we disagree with someone drinking alcohol, are we going to now say that someone should go out and fight people that are drinking, alcohol in the bars? Absolutely, absolutely not. So just as we don't do that for that sin, we're not going to do that for this sin. So we don't condone any sort of violence or any type of oppression to these people. And anytime we hear that, um, we will condemn it.